I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Seth, and this is the Hornady Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to this episode, as it were, part 2, with special guests, Preston Lentfer, Ben Searing. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to have him. Special.
Well, it's a special episode, a special project. It's
a
special project on part 2 of How to Wildcat. It's always fun to get into cool stuff there's nothing new under the sun, like we said in the first episode. So it's very rare to dream up something that hasn't been dreamed up before, especially in the world of wildcats. And we're not doing anything outside of the realm of, already been done before, but it's still fun to do because you're not going to the store to buy ammo for this. You're not buying an off-the-shelf rifle at Sportsman's Warehouse. This is something that you have to think and go through a process. And then when you finish with it, it's yours and only yours. And that's pretty cool because there's never going to be a gun, well, not never, but there's no guns right now that is going to be exactly like you build it chambered in this cartridge. And that's part of the cool factor for me. I don't know. How do you guys feel?
Well, like you said, we're just taking something that existed and we're just putting it around what we want it to do. We're putting it around our bullet and changing it up that way. But it's still an existing Wildcat, so it's going to be awesome.
I'm sure when this print was made, there was not 138 grain A-tip 25 cal.
No,
not even got a modified
or a 134 ELD match, or a lot of those other really cool, a lot of the traditional hollow point boat tail style designs. Obviously the 131 Ace kind of didn't create, but man, it put the fuel to the fire for the 25 cal craze. Now we're going back several years, and that company is no more, as I understand it, but Sierra took over that bullet, and it's a slippery 25, and that really put a huge push back into hot rod 25s, bringing them back into the 21st century, and that's what we're doing here now with our 134 ELD match, the 138 A-tip. Am I going to compete with this cartridge in this build? Absolutely not. Am I going to load a hunting bullet into it and shoot a deer or an antelope? Yeah, probably. But what I'm really looking forward to doing is laying down and shooting steel real far away.
This might be good for NRL Hunter.
Oh, it would be fantastic for NRL
Hunter. I might try that once.
Okay, fair enough. Well, you can't build a gun that doesn't have a chamber in it. So we talked on the first episode. No. Oh. Well, you could, but man.
I don't know.
You'd have to use
Where have you been, Preston?
Muzzleloader.
But even that's kind of a chamber.
Yeah, it still has a spot for the powder. It doesn't start with rifling.
Yeah, it just has rifling.
So first episode, we talked about how to pick one. Like, it's just some design elements to be considerate of when you're picking, hey, what kind of Wildcat am I after? And we talked about doing something kind of like an Ackley Improved version, which is what we're doing. We're taking a cartridge that exists. We're going to put some improvement to it. And we're going to improve it beyond what Ackley had done originally. And then we kind of juxtapose that against doing something completely new. There's a gentleman I've been conversing with, law enforcement officer, and just a tinkerer, a reloader. Mr. Crowley out there has got a really cool 6mm design that one's pretty, you're not just necking something up and down. This one's kind of unique in that regard. So there's different ends of the spectrum. Completely try to dream up something new under the sun, or maybe go a little bit more of a traditional route and everywhere in between. And what we elected was, let's look at what bullet we want to shoot, what the chamber needs to look like, what the case dimensions should be to fit in what actions we want, all those things that we need to be considerate of to select a Wildcat. And we landed on the 257 Roberts in lieu of 25-06.
Yeah. Part 1 was the fun one for me. That's the dreaming, right? That's the thinking, just overall feelings and more feelings, emotion, right?
Yeah, really.
This
exploring the space.
This one here is not up my alley. It's up Ben's alley though, and it's a little bit more technical.
It is, but that is the fun part. That just the daydreaming. It don't cost you nothing. You can drive your 40 minutes to work, daydreaming about, well, what if I do that? Well, if I could put that bolt in there, how long is that going to be? Well, what about that case? Do I want to go short and round, or do I want to go long and slender? How do I want to do this? That doesn't cost you nothing, and it's just fun to explore. Once you make that decision, now it's time to go to that next step, which is today's episode, which is let's get a custom reamer ordered. And there's several brands out there. We've got kind of our personal favorites. And then within that ordering custom reamers, there's a spectrum. And we're going to talk first about kind of what we're doing here. We'll start really elementary level of just ordering a custom reamer. Then we'll get into the degree that we're ordering a custom reamer, and then we'll talk about full-on custom. And the long and short of it is, the purpose of a custom reamer is to get your dimensions in that chamber. And we know after thousands upon thousands of bullets fired that there are some geometry things that we can control in the chamber. They're going to lend that thing to nice EVs and good accuracy. So starting at entry level into getting your first custom reamer, let's talk about the 308 Winchester. Great cartridge.
It's a great example.
Famed
I know where you're
cartridge. So if you go to, in this case, Manson makes
Reamers.
a great reamer. We've got a great relationship with those guys over there. There's other good ones out there too. JGS is on the top of the list, and Alpha Munitions is making reamers, good high quality stuff. You go to Alpha, let's say, give them a call. You want a 308? Well, they're going to have some options for you that are still 308 reamers and that are going to take a lot of the guesswork out. So let's say you wanted to build a 308 Winchester and buy factory 308 ammo, but you want to set it up from the chamber side to be a little bit more accurate, or have a little more propensity for accuracy. They might be able to help you out with some chamber designs that they've already done that you can just order. They'll send you the reamer. You can punch your barrel out, and you've got a match tolerant dimension in your 308 that's going to work with factory ammo. That's as simple as that.
Absolutely. They may ask you for something, let's say in that 308, you want it centered around this bullet. You're not going to shoot any other
ELD.
bullet.
Yeah.
Either they have dealt with that, or they're going to ask you to seat it where you want it and send it to them as a dummy. They're going to take a look at it, and they're going to design their reamer around that if need be.
Yep. Well, and
they might ask us a simple question like, "What's your magazine length on this particular rifle that you're going to do?"
Yeah. How far you want it off the lance?
Into consideration.
Yeah, because we work closely with a lot of them. If they have a particular bullet, we'll give them the information they need so they can lay their chamber out for their customers with that particular bullet in there. So you may not have to do a thing; it may already be done. Just say, "This is what I want."
Yep.
And they'll say, "We've done it. Here's the reamer."
Yep. And you don't have to feel ignorant or sheepish or whatever to call and ask. They're in the business of making money, and they want to sell you a reamer, and they want you to have good success with that reamer. So if you call them up, just ask some good questions, they'll help you out. And I brought up the 308 simply because there are so many staple bullets, and this is kind of, the sport isn't dead, but it's not as popular as it once was. But if you called up any reamer manufacturer and say you're shooting Palma, I guarantee they will have a 308 Winchester Palma chamber for 155 or 155 and a half grain bullet that everybody shoots in Palma, and they're going to set it up for a certain jump distance and a certain freebore diameter, and they might tighten things up, maybe in other critical areas around the shoulder and the neck area, and you're still going to get a gun that you could chamber factory SAMI ammunition, feed and function fine, but it's going to be set up better for your specific purpose. So if you're in the business of, hey, I'm trying to just build a custom rifle, but I don't need some crazy Wildcat, but I want it in one of my staple cartridges, you don't have to get a standard SAMI reamer, especially if you're going to hand load for it. You can get exactly what you want. And most of these reamer manufacturers, they're going to have something either readily available or that they've already done before, or that's just that's no problem. We could definitely do that. It should be that simple. So 308 was a prime example. Another one, a big one, 300 Win Mag. If you're building a custom-built 300 Win Mag hunting rifle or long-range rifle, I would encourage you to get a non-standard SAMI reamer. You're going to set yourself up for success with factory ammo and hand loads alike. But you don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to have an engineering degree. You don't have to have the software that you have been.
Right.
You can just call them up and ask.
Absolutely. And even you were saying with standard stuff, but even some of the popular Wildcats, they've already got a lot of those.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not wanting to change
was an
anything,
example for a long time.
Exactly. The 280 Ackley till it became SAMI. They had it. All right. So a lot of your common Wildcats, they've got them. Call them and ask them for them.
Yep.
Say, I want to do this. Nope, it's done, but it's been done before. Here you go.
Yep.
So it really doesn't take anything other than your 40-minute drive to work and dreaming up what you want to do.
Bore Driver ELDX. Fast and easy to load. The polymer base seals the bore and engages the rifling while the post and pedals grip the bullet's boat tail. With its superior ballistic coefficients and reduced drag, the Bore Driver ELDX drives its 340 grain bullet to target with the energy and accuracy that turns shots into success. When you have one shot this muzzleloader season, make it count and use the best. Bore Driver ELDX from Hornady.
Now transitioning into, okay, you have that entry level of, I want a standard chambering, but I want maybe my throat diameter a little tighter. I want my free bore angle a little different. I want a certain length of free bore for a certain bolt that I'm shooting. Okay, they can handle that pretty simple, and you're still getting a standard SAMI approved cartridge like the 308 Winchester, for example. Where we're at here is 257 Roberts Ackley Improved. Now that has been a Wildcat since the 257 Roberts basically came out, right? Like people,
maybe even before. I've seen Wildcats out before we've even released the cartridge.
Oh, 100%. Well, in this case, you had the 7x57 Mauser who had this huge history, and I'm sure that was necked up and down forever. So,
yep.
In this case, you could call Manson or JGS or Alpha or whoever you'd prefer to use, and they probably got a 257 Ackley that they could, 257 Ackley, you bet, we'll cut you one, send it to you. But that's not where we're at. Because we have some software, because we have some special bullets that we want, Ben, you did a little homework and you laid things out. It's like an improvement on the Ackley Improved. It's like the Ackley Improved.
Exactly.
The AII.
Yeah.
Yeah. So walk us through taking, what is a relatively common, not super common, but relatively common Wildcat, and what you can do. Walk us. I know you're using SolidWorks, but CAD would work well, and there's some other software out there to say, okay, we have this bullet, and this is how and why we're going to set it up the way we are.
All right. So in our case, 257 Ackley Improved Roberts. That's what we decided on. It fit, as in our first episode, it fit what we were going to do with our rifles, the magazine lengths, everything. So at that point, we already kind of knew what bullets we wanted to seat in that. And we talked about the parameters. We wanted those bullets seated with the boat tail bearing surface. Yeah, that's right. Just ahead of the donut, or the proverbial donut, I guess, if it comes. So we kind of knew our load lengths, and that also gives us what we need for free bore length. Okay, and the free bore in a chamber is where the bullet has free fit before it reaches the lands. All right, it's the straight portion beyond the neck.
Yep.
Okay. We knew. I pulled the reamer from Manson. I just pulled his standard 257 Roberts Ackley Improved, as we mentioned earlier. You can just order that standard. And when I looked it over, I could see a 50 thousandths free bore there. And I knew that wouldn't work with our bullet seated out where we need it.
Mm-hmm.
We'd had to have our bullet way down in the case for that 50 thousandths free bore.
Might work really good with a 75 VMAX.
Oh yeah. Or your traditional, your traditional 117 great boat tail spire points, which are phenomenal bullets, still are.
But that's not going to work for us. We would have buried that bullet about 1/8 of an inch into the rifling.
Exactly. It just wouldn't have been good for our load length. So that's the first thing I looked at. I said, all right, we got to have more free bore. So I took them and I laid them out. The two different bullets that we talked about, our 134 match and our 138 A-tip, and we laid them out. And I said, all right, when I lay these out, I even did a section view for myself because I had the software to do it so that I could measure that point, and I knew I wanted it 50 thousandths ahead. I could then lay out the cartridge and say, here's my load length. What's my free bore?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, this cartridge has 198 straight a bearing portion. So we're going to need at least that much free bore. So we decided on 200 thousandths.
Okay.
So then, I don't have to redraw his reamer. Most of these manufacturers have a drawing they can give you. I just crossed off his 50 and I wrote 200.
Simple.
Okay. And when we make the call and order that reamer, I'll give him those information. We work closely with him. We'll give Ray Gross a call and change the dimensions I want. He'll send me another print so I can look at it. If we like it, goes.
So here's a good point, though. You said we got 198 thou of minimum free bore, so you ordered it at 200. Now, that bullet is seated 50 thou, where the bearing surface boat tail junction is 50 thou above where that donut could potentially
The
form.
neck shoulder
So
junction.
I want more than 2 thousandths jump, and I've got 50 thousandths where I can still push that bullet down and get the appropriate jump that I want. Say I usually go for 20 to 30 thou, and I'm still above that donut.
And we have another avenue too. If we don't, I know that's down the road, but you order the reamer you way want it. But should we decide that, no, let's have a little more throat, most manufacturers can make you a throating reamer.
Yeah.
So you can go in there and throat it just a little bit deeper.
Yep.
If you don't feel like you're getting enough jump.
Yep. And you can do a lot of that by hand. For the competent hobbyist,
that's right.
You can throat those by hand. It doesn't take much effort.
So the options are endless. The next thing we did, we looked over the reamer. Like I said, I was able, because I have the programming software, and there's other software out there. You mentioned it earlier.
Quick Design
and some of them. Yeah.
Quick Load.
There's some stuff out there that'll help you design one if you should so choose. But if you have access to programs like that, I could lay out the chamber. I could put the cartridge in the chamber and see how everything I wanted to fit. Another thing we found in our testing, or at least my preference, is to tighten up the free bore diameter. Not only length, but the diameter. Typically, if you look in the older cartridges, it's about 1 thousandths usually.
Well, it's in the 300 Win Mag, it's 8.
It's even more.
Yes,
I mean, we're talking a 308 bullet being shoved down to what,
315 hole, 316 hole. Yeah.
So
and that's a maximum spec, of course.
Of course. And this is where you said earlier they can make you a
match
reamer, and that's because the bore is probably going to be 309. Okay. What we want is only a 0.5 thousandths. So the original reamer from Manson was 258 on that free bore, where I want to see 257.5, and we still can argue that a little bit. We could go a little smaller, but I want 257.5 with only a minus tolerance. No, nothing bigger than 257.5, so I'm thinking about minus 0.2 on that, so that I'm anywhere from 257.2 or 3 to 257.5.
Very minimal clearance in there.
Exactly.
And I would argue that, and maybe I'm wrong here, we're just talking it out, I wouldn't even mind a 258 in the grand scheme of things.
If it's an honest 258.
If it's an honest 258, this cartridge is a little bit overbore, and I don't want to have to worry about a carbon ring in the future.
Now, I can see that, and there's probably 6 of one, half dozen another. I really like it guided. If I could get it 257 and 1/10, I would.
You just
but
want
then
it
again,
to
that's a
hand
personal,
itself off to the rifle.
Well, and we can take this tangent real quick. It's not tangential, but one of the reasons we liked to tighten up that free bore diameter is when the bullet is being released from the case neck and jumping into the rifling, before that bullet is completely supported, it can ballot around in there a little bit, and it can get crooked. And if it engraves crooked in the rifling, there is no correction.
Absolutely.
And we found those tighter free bore diameters shoot better dispersion across the board. So that's one thing that you can do.
And that comes to light more with longer ogive bullets, because now we have to have more free bore. Okay. Back in the days when this started at 50 thousandths free bore, the bullets into the rifling started straight, but it's still being held in the case too. See? So with a longer free bore,
and that's
it's
why
out there a little further.
Old school bench resters, old school varminers, they would jam the bullets.
Correct.
They would, give it a 2, 3, 4, 5 thousandths jam to try to ensure that they were squaring up into the rifle.
There's some bench resters that seat their bullet with their bolt.
Yeah, they do like 1 or 2 thou neck tension.
And they just seat it with the bolt and fire it.
Yep. Low neck tension, and then
absolutely.
They let the chamber.
Built custom dies for those guys.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know what I would say is, I'm not going to do that.
No, that's not my guy. That's not my guy.
Not for me.
But everybody's got their deal. So then we looked at we also like the lead-in angle. I like a minute and a half, 1.5 degrees for a good minute and a half. That's pretty tight. 1.5 degrees worth of lead-in. I've seen some others with more, but that's, again, a nice gradual funnel right down into that rifling.
Yep.
So that looked good. So really the only 2 things that we had to change to make it the Ackley Improved.
A minute and a half.
So,
that's a tight angle.
Yeah.
So
it was
1
crazy.
degree.
So 1 degree and 30 minutes is basically, but yeah. So we have a nice lead in. We're going to change the free bore, and we're going to change the free bore diameter to fit around the bullets that we want. Now, I made that for the longest bullet. Now, should you want to do that, you may not have access to this stuff, and that's okay. You can take a bullet into the dummy case even before it's fired, especially if it's an Ackley, because the headspace or the neck shoulder junction doesn't necessarily change, and you can seat it where you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And you can send that to your reamer manufacturer. Like I said before, they'll measure that all out. But it's very possible that they've already asked the manufacturer about this new bullet, and they've already kind of laid it out in their chamber, and you could just ask for it,
Yep.
and they'll have it. We just had access to this, so I was able to draw it up and look things over and say, yeah, that's what I like. That's what I like.
And that's the whole point of it. That's
exactly.
That's what we like.
Yep. It gave me an idea also of headspace, where min chamber will overlap max cartridge just a little bit, so you get a little bit of crush if you want it. But where we have it, we can set it exactly where we want to. So you can take all those things into play. Now, that's what we chose to do. We could improve it more if we wanted. In this case, the 257 Ackley Improved, my rule of thumb is 10 thousandths of taper. I like to see that. Well, this one has 15. So I could have said, let's make that shoulder 460. Let's go a little bigger on that shoulder because I want as much case capacity as I can.
Sure.
But we didn't feel like we needed to
No,
go
we're
there. There's
talking
enough
5,000.
That's right. There's enough of an improvement in the cartridge itself that this is where we wanted to go.
Gosh.
What's that, Preston?
I'm looking at the actual 257 Roberts, and there is 42,000.
42 thousandths of taper. Yeah.
And what's
So
the shoulder angle on that?
it's 20, I think.
No, it's less.
17 and
Yeah,
a
I was
half.
going to say 17 and a half is what
I don't
came to
remember.
mind.
I think it's the same angle, if I'm not mistaken, as the 7x57.
No, 20 degrees,
45 minutes.
So 20
20 and 3/4 degrees.
And so what I had argued initially doing a 30-degree improvement versus the 40-degree improvement, just because that's what Hornady does is 30-degree shoulders. But that's another one that you can choose that at this time.
Absolutely. This is the
there's-
point where you can do it.
And if you didn't catch the first episode, I voted 40 for posterity.
You did, and
Yeah.
I wanted 35. So we were kind of right in the middle, and
So
we
I
settled.
won.
Preston did win this time.
Yeah,
we don't
well,
let him do it very often,
It
but
was
he did
the
win.
easy button, and the only reason I wanted 30 was in 2013 when I was dreaming about building a 257 Roberts Improved. I was going to do a 30-degree Improved, so I've just held on to that idea for more than a decade, and that was just what it was. But the 40-degree is easy enough.
Well,
Now,
it sounds like when we finish this, you better follow up with a 30 degree.
no,
then and compare
no,
it.
this is what I need.
Look at this. 100 free bullets when I buy these select Hornady reloading tools.
Wow, 500 free bullets with certain Hornady reloading presses and kits.
Well, what do they have?
Let's get loaded.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench. Choose from the most durable, precise, and convenient tools on the market and receive free bullets to get you loaded. Visit Hornady.com for further details.
Next time we get loaded, I'm buying.
So now shifting gears into that last stage of completely custom. Maybe you're taking a 404 Jeffrey, cutting off the shoulder, and you're trying to get a cartridge, maybe pick a diameter, pick a length, 6.5, 7.30, whatever it is, but you're starting from a 404 Jeffrey with the neck and shoulder cut off. That brings in a whole new arena of ordering a reamer, and which not the topic of this podcast. We'll get to this in one of the next episodes, working with a custom die manufacturer that can help you step that shoulder down, set it, get your neck formed, and then get a set of final dies to reload the cartridge with. But in the world of reamers, how do you walk through, how do you make some of those decisions, Ben, of, well, how much case taper do I need? How much case taper is necessary? Is case taper necessary? What do I want to do for shoulder angle? How do you, again, if you're starting with a cylindrical straight wall stick of brass, how do you make some of those decisions?
Well, I guess for me, I like to see some taper in the chamber. I have seen some straight cartridges out there. They're hard to extract after they're fired. Let me just pull a new example. For instance, the 5.7 by 28.
Yep.
Okay? That is a
Thumbs
straight wall
down.
designed cartridge. And if you do not have lacquered cases, which is slick 'em, they won't come out. You have to, so reloading them is tough. And so in the dies, I had to put a taper on them so they would come out of the die as well.
Yeah.
But then if you had the wrong magazine, they wouldn't stack straight like it was designed. They started stacking like this in a curve because there was a taper on them. So there's lots of things to consider when you want to do it. I like to see it taper. My rule is 10. I've seen a lot of people do 5s with Wildcats. Obviously, factory stuff is more tapered because of that. It extracts easier. That's what they want. Your case fires to chamber when it lets off. If it does stick somewhere, I don't have to move it very far for it to come right out. Okay, my primary extraction will take care of that. If I have a straight wall cartridge and I get it out there, primary extraction is only going to move this much. But if it's stuck the whole way straight walled, I got to pull the whole way. So I think that's probably the design of taper and why it's in there. Some stuff, it doesn't matter. Revolver stuff that can be straight walled, right? Because you don't have near the pressure behind that case. It'll spring back and just pop right out straight wall.
Excellent. So for general rule of thumb, if you're going to lay out a Wildcat, pick your base to shoulder length and account for at a bare minimum 5, but maybe 10 thou, 12 thou a taper, because it's going to make your life easier reloading the brass. And you want to maximize your brass life, of course.
That's right.
And you don't want to end up having to bring a range mallet to tap your bolt open.
And then think about things like, how much forming do I want to do? How much do I want to buy formed dice to make this cartridge, or do I want it to be like Ackley does, and can I just put it in there and fire it? Think about where that neck shoulder junction's at. Ponder what angle you want, and because you're probably not going to know, there are some quick design and things that might tell you what your case capacity is going to be. To try to go down that road, but I don't start there. I just know if I'm using that bigger case, I'm going to have more case capacity, and I'll work the load around that.
Now, here's one that could be, we'll save the full dive for talking about dies, but when you're, let's say you start with that cylindrical stick of brass. My base to shoulder is going to be 2 inches. How do you pick your shoulder angle? And because from a die manufacturer, Ben, not all shoulder angles are equal, and some of the desire of going with that shoulder that's 30, 35, 40 degrees is the brass doesn't grow quite as much. You don't have to trim it quite as often, and in theory, it channels that flame inside the cases as burning to the case wall, not the chamber. And there's a lot of people that have certain preferences, but from a manufacturing standpoint, people ask this all the time, and I'll address it right now. We make 30-degree angles because they're easier to manufacture. We get all the advantage of that 35 or 40-degree shoulder angle with less scrap, because when you're trying to put that sharp shoulder angle on there, it can be a problem. So you consider that something if you're forming brass?
You should consider that, because it's going to be another step or more in the process. When we build custom dies, 50 thousandths increments on diameter with shoulders of no more than 30 degrees. Okay. If I go 35, we have too much failure. If I try 40, we definitely have failure. In other words,
have to add
we start crushing your Jeffrey brass. So we have to basically move the shoulder all back at 30, and then we've got to build you a hydraulic form die, or you got to fire form it back out to 40.
So 30 is kind of, if you're trying to do this as economically as possible, you could move it 30 degrees in one pass, and that's still moving it a lot.
You might not necessarily get it in one pass. It depends on your diameter reduction. I mean, if you're going from the 404 Jeffrey down to 6.5, diameter to the diameter divided by 50 thousandths. But you can get the shoulder right there like you're darn close to your fire formed case. Rather than having to blow that forward with a hydraulic form die or fire form it. And we all know fire forming, you have to ask yourself, do I want to put wear and tear on my barrel and spend money on powder and primers that aren't necessarily intended for a target? And I think that's why Ackley was so successful with his Wildcats, because you didn't have to spend money to the target. You could just shoot the ammo, and many times it shot just as well. And I may have mentioned this in the last episode. I have a 22K Hornet that I have yet to load for, because it shoots the darn Hornet so well. So I'm just fire forming brass. I can't tell you how many brass I have that are fire formed ready to go, but I don't need to load for it. So those are things to take into consideration. And then as we spoke earlier, after you get that done, you get your neck done. One of the things that's overlooked probably the most is when you consider brass, consider it in a volume. Okay. There's a certain amount of volume, that little bit of volume around that ring should stay the same. Okay. So as I go down, everything's getting smaller. I'm getting thicker, because I still have to save the same amount of volume. That's probably the thing that's most overlooked, is that you may have to thin out the necks of those brass if you're not careful.
You're going to need a neck turner.
And a lot of your reamer manufacturers will know that. But if you spec it out, he's going to give it like you want it. And then you get down there and say, why won't this work? Oh, no. I've got to thin my necks. I either need to turn them, I need to form ream them, I need to do something about it. So keep that in mind too, the further down your case, because you don't necessarily know what the inner geometry of the punch that manufactured that brass is. And I'm getting technical, but I'm a nerd, and that's why I can be that way, right? So you might be down where that punch started getting smaller in the formation of that brass, and you're going to bring it in, and it looks great on the outside, but your neck starts at 10 and it ends up at 15 at the bottom of the neck. So do you want to taper in your neck in the chamber, or do you want to get rid of that? Those are all questions you have to ask yourself, and keep that in mind.
Yep. That's important. And so it sounds like, everything we just talked about as far as like designing a cartridge from scratch is then added to step 2 of, or that second topic, like ours, where you're talking about the throat geometry and all that. There's one thing we didn't talk about that you should be considerate of at all 3 levels, whether you're ordering just a slightly improved version of a standard SAMU chamber, you're doing something semi-custom like we are, or you're going full-on custom. That is neck diameter. Because when you're playing around in no man's land, if you will, when you're the keeper of your own fortune, you can run into problems, and we experienced it in tech, people calling up having issues with the neck diameter of a loaded round not chambering, and it was because they had a neck turn requirement
on their chamber. Yep. You have to be careful for that.
Well, even when guys were doing 300 blackout before it became wildly popular and accepted, right? They would be chopping down 223 cases with their Harbor Freight chop saw, and then they'll neck them, and then certain brands of brass, and it would vary from lot to lot. There was a whole list of them on the internet, but some of them were too thick, and they had to neck turn or just not use them.
Yeah, and keep in mind that what you just said, different manufacturers of brass. Should you do this, Wildcat? Well, I necked the Winchester brass down, and it was spot on, worked just fine. But now I can't get any more Winchester, so I got Hornady brass. I neck it down. It's not apples to apples necessarily. Yep. We don't know what Winchester's punches were versus our punchers. So it may be Wildcat specific. And that particular one specifically could have been neck thickness. It's also a bit of headspace, and that comes along with forming custom cartridges for these Wildcats. When you take something down and you work it down hard like that, like in that case, the die was designed to size a 300 blackout, not to form a 223. So when you squeeze that brass down, brass naturally wants to return home. It would bounce back. So you had the neck issue plus excess shoulder.
Potential headspace.
Exactly. So they would send them down, and I would say, well, we either need to take some off the shell holder so you can actually move the shoulder back far enough to kind of plan for that bounce forward, because then once you fire it, your standard die will work. So those are, we can get off on many tangents as we want to, but
we didn't get off on, he mentioned range mallet, and we didn't even get off on it.
Yeah, the range. Well, that's kind of an inside joke. But so basically, I just wanted to talk through that as almost a public service announcement, that if you're doing any sort of custom anything, and it's got a custom chamber in there, it's possible that you end up having to neck turn. Now, you can do some things to help mitigate that. If you've got a ball mic, you can mic several different brands of brass for neck wall thickness. If you're like, for us, we're going to use Hornady brass. We can take a loaded round and just measure OD on the loaded round with a micrometer and based our prints off that way.
And you can also, we know it's going to get thicker, but let's say your cartridge overall length is 2 inches. You can take that 404 Jeffrey, cut it off with a chop saw at 2 inches, take the ball mic and say, okay, I know my neck is going to be, I want my neck a 1/4 inch, 250. I can take that ball mic and I can measure going inward about 250 thousandths, about where my neck would be, and see if it's straight at that point. Then I'll know if my inner geometry, if it's already got a taper, that's only going to be exacerbated when I take it down. So there's tons of things you can do. Now, many of it has been done before. Okay, that's the great thing about it. Your reamer manufacturer might know, like, this is what it's going to be. We've seen a guy do this, or something like that at about that position. So we knew what it was going to be and go from that point. And there's 2 ways to do it. In my opinion, some guys just take a plethora of dies that they have off their shelf and they start sizing and make something look like what they want.
Yep.
And you can send that to the reamer manufacturer and they'll make it. Then they come to their custom die guy and say, all right, I want you to build me the right stuff so I don't have to cherry rig about 4 of these. I took my 6 millimeter arc die, and I cut it off halfway so I could push that shoulder back. I mean, people do that all the time because it's the shade tree way, or not really shade tree, but the jerry rig way to get what I want to go. I did it the way I want to, and some people never order custom dies after that, but many will. Some of them come to me first and say, "We have this idea.
How do I?
But I want it milled a dummy first." So then we talk about it first. We get the form dies done first. We get everything done up to the full length size die. Send it to them. They form it down. Get a reamer. Once they have fired cases, we're able to build the full length size die. So
it's a process.
2 different ways. It is a process if you want to go completely on your own. But again, as simple as you want it to be, or as complex as you want it to be, just like the reloading process, whatever you want, you can have most of the time.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think we covered that pretty well. There's a couple loose ends that I want to bring up, and not necessarily loose ends, but I do want to talk to you, Ben, your preference on, you want a floating pilot or a solid pilot reamer?
I want a removable pilot. I want a floating pilot. Yeah.
Walk us through what the difference is and what do you think the advantage is of going with a floating pilot?
All right. The way a chamber reamer works is on the end of it, there is a bore, your rifle bore diameter pilot to guide the reamer. So you're guided back here in your chuck or your tailstock of your lathe, plus that bore diameter. It keeps everything in a line. So this is pushing in the bore and this is held back here, so it keeps everything in a line so we can't get crooked. Now, you're usually in a lathe, if you're doing it, your reamer's held still in your tailstock and the lathe is turning. Well, that's turning right on that solid pilot to me. Okay?
Sure.
I want the pilot to turn with it so I don't mar my bore anymore.
Yeah, gall something.
Does it? No, but theory it could. I'm a theory guy.
Okay.
That's why I like a removable pilot. Not to mention, there is tolerance on that bore. Okay. If I have a removable pilot and I find out my bore is just a touch bigger than a normal bore and I don't want any play, I can order a pilot to that diameter and put it on the end of my reamer and run my reamer in. So that's my preference.
Opposite, which may have happened to Preston here recently on a 22 Creedmoor build. If I'm not mistaken, that was
too small.
Pilot locked up and snapped off the reamer
in the chamber, and then you got to cut it off. And if it's carbon fiber, you might be into the scary part of the throat of that carbon fiber barrel, huh, Preston?
Luckily, we got a Mike Jensen.
Yeah, Whitey fixed that up, and that rifle's built, ready to roll right now.
And we'll have to get him on here for
100%
when we start doing these barrels.
Yep.
Yeah.
Utilize your space your way with the modular Hornady Security Square Lock Organizing System. Mount the Square Lock panels anywhere in your home or shop. Then attach the wide assortment of Square Lock accessories to securely store firearms, tools, gear, or any other valuables in any possible configuration. Keep your reloading bench or gun room organized with the Square Lock Modular Organizing System from Hornady Security.
So, basically, to summarize everything that we talked about, it all starts with, for the customer or for the listener, it all starts with just call the reamer manufacturer, call Ben at Hornady, talk custom dies, because between the reamer manufacturers and people that make custom dies, we've probably heard it before or have a really good, like, I can, this plus this equals this.
Yeah.
So let me help you out.
Yeah.
It starts with the phone call. You can save yourself a lot of turmoil from, shade tree and stuff if you just make a phone call.
Yep. Just ask, because it may have been done, or if it's not the experience there, having done it before, we'll just guide you. That'll be
and you could avoid some pitfalls. You could avoid just, you can go to a lot of these manufacturers' website and just order, this. I used to see it back in the day in our tech days with 6BR a lot, where somebody would get a 6BR and not know that it was a certain neck diameter. I forget the diameter now, but it was a certain neck diameter, and they'd call them like, I'm having problems, and they said, I need a neck turn. I don't even know what that is. Do you have a neck turn die?
262.
Something like that. So you can avoid just some potential problems with just a phone call. And the phone call, largely doesn't cost you anything, and you can gain a lot of experience and get ahead of the curve just by making the phone call. And it sets you up for success for building a Wildcat from any degree, whether that's just your .308 Winchester with a 2012 Palma match reamer, or the .338 404 Jeffrey Wildcat that you dreamed up that's never been done before. There's a lot of room in there in between, and it starts with a phone call, building a good relationship with somebody that's going to help you out with the custom dies and somebody that's going to be able to help you out laying out the reamer, because a lot of folks don't have access to SolidWorks or CAD or whatever you have to use. Most folks don't have that, but the reamer manufacturers can help you out, lay out bullets and look at how much freebore length, freebore diameter, etc. So with that, we've got a reamer, going to get it on order.
Yeah, we'll make that call today.
And parts are showing up.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Barrel delivered for Ben.
Done.
Preston and I'm going to reach out again today, follow up on those, but those barrels are ordered, and my action here, Preston's action here.
Rifle.
Well, yeah, you're building yours from
just a tomato steak, though, till we take the action off of it.
My dummies feed great.
Yeah, you are. This guy's already put together dummies.
Yeah, of course.
Doesn't have the improved shoulder, but that's great. That's what you want.
I would like
to see what it looks.
When we do kind of get further on down the actual build, I want you to bring in your Ayler printout of how that rifle performed before you tore it apart.
Oh yeah, I need to shoot it yet.
Yeah, of course, but
yeah, that would be nice to see.
He's got it. So this is actually the everyman build, in my opinion. This, I won't go into all the details, but this is a factory rifle. It's got a scope mounted on it. It's ready to shoot. You're waiting on ammo, or has the ammo been delivered?
No, I got it. I just got to go shoot it.
Ammo's been delivered to the office.
Everything's busy this time of year.
This rifle is literally ready to shoot. And you could go hunting with it for almost anything in North America, and be perfectly capable.
I think, not to spoil anything, but Jack O'Connor would say it could handle anything in North America.
He would. Yep. He would. And if we weren't pressuring you, you probably would never fire it. Just tear it apart and let it go.
Curious.
You're curious to know what it'll do.
With one of those cartridges in my hand.
If it shoots well, are you going to change your mind?
No, I'm going to save the barrel.
You'll save the barrel. Thread it back
Not
on.
A tomato
Smart
steak.
move. Exactly. It won't be a tomato steak.
I mean, I've already got a pile of barrels. What's one more?
Yeah. And you've got plenty of tomato steaks.
Yeah. I should say that
I use cages.
I mean, I didn't buy a rifle to start. I'm using a rifle that I already have that's wildcatted to 338.6, but I am saving the barrel.
It's already custom.
Because it shoots well and it's already custom.
Yep.
So I got to debate. I already know the dimensions of the action. Do I just make a barrel and make it a thread on? Or do I want to try the switch slug? I don't know. Switch slug makes it easy in the field, but how often do I need to change it in the field?
Never.
Very rarely.
That's my question.
Yep.
And where we have access to the tools, just thread that barrel off, put another one on. The headspace is going to be the same because I've already
just a barrel
blueprinted
vise.
that tenon.
Yeah, just a barrel vise and an action wrench.
That simple.
Yep.
So
I'm
exciting
looking forward
stuff.
to this. Yeah, I've got some big decisions to make in the world of rifle stock.
I do too.
Yours is, well, yeah, you've got.
I've got two options I'm leaning
Okay.
between.
Ben, yours is handled.
Well, it is, but this morning driving in here, I thought, the rifle stock that's on the gun is an HS Precision. I do like the
Love
stock,
that stock.
but it's tapered for that barrel. This barrel's not tapered the same.
Yep.
That barrel's more of a pencil barrel. This is a truly hunting rifle. So I'm thinking, I don't know what I want to do yet. I've got some friends out there I might reach out.
Barrel channel.
Preston,
I know.
Preston takes little cylindrical portions of barrel and emery paper and sandpaper. I put it in the mill and drag an 1.25 inch ball end straight through it.
That's the easiest way. That's the easiest way. I also thought about nobody's doing a chassis, but do I want a chassis? What's that? There's a company out there making a chassis that's well, it's not really a chassis, but there's aluminum throughout, and it's a fiberglass.
Are you talking the Hunt 26?
Is that what I'm thinking?
Or are you talking the Seekins element?
Maybe that's the one.
It's like a fiberglass or carbon fiber forend that looks like a stock with like an AR style pistol grip and then a skeletonized folding.
Yeah.
That's a slick nickel.
I thought about that.
I don't think they sell the chassis by itself, but it is cool.
I'm also an old man, and rifles should look kind of traditional, so I might just end up with them. Maybe I'll just give old Boyd's a call.
Maybe go buy a piece of walnut. Start whittling.
Mike Jensen, who we'll see later on these shows, has a piece over there, and it's beautiful.
That's
I can't pry it off him. He gave quite a bit of money for that. He's going to make a whole stock.
There's many good shade tree mechanics out there. They just
Lots
don't have
of
a garage, okay?
Exactly.
I wanted to say that out loud.
Hey, I have a garage, and I still do most of my stuff in the shade. Yeah, or the shade of the garage. Get it outside.
I think everything started that way. Even in engineering, I see it lots. We've got to come up with something, and to get there, you jerry rig it. You shade tree it to get it there, and then say, okay, now we want to do it. Exactly.
That's
proof
what
of
you
concept.
Call it. All right. Well, Preston's got proof of concept. His dummies feed function real good through his donor
We
rifle.
got room to spare in the mag, so
All right.
just a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go get some more parts on order, follow up on these barrels. And is there anything else you want to leave the listener with about Reamers?
Just give your reamer manufacturer
Yep.
a call. That's start there. Start with your die guy or your reamer manufacturer guy, as you said.
Yep.
Your ideas are out there.
Just
and they're
open
endless.
up to them like they're a therapist and you need help.
They're your ballistic therapist. Ballistic therapy.
Now, I hope the reamer manufacturers don't get mad at us for telling them that, but
Yeah.
I mean, come on, guys, that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
Or
they
shoot
will
them
help
an
you.
email.
Shoot
They've
him an
done
email. But genuinely, all jokes aside, you call Hornady Manufacturing, you can talk to Ben. If you're listening to this and you're like, well, I've been dreaming up this thing for several years, and you want to walk through how to do it with Ben, you can call Ben in Custom Dies, and you can talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with anybody else that makes custom dies or custom reamers. You can talk to these people. They're real life people and have a lot of information in there that they're willing to give to you over the phone or via email.
And whether, expert, like an X as a has-been and a spurt as a drip under pressure, they're just expert in their field because that's what they've done for the last how many years. They do it. They deal with
Yep.
it every day. So
Did you
You're
hear
not
about the
talking anything.
farmer that got the award?
which award?
He was outstanding in his field.
All right. With that, I appreciate the banter, and we'll get this one wrapped up, guys. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for
You
having me.
bet.
Guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode about part 2 of how to wildcat and ordering your custom reamer. Couple housekeeping notes. The Western Hunt Expo, Salt Lake City. We are going to be there. Now, we have a booth. It's a small booth, not what you typically see from Hornady, but we're excited to come out. So please swing to the booth. Let us know if you listen to the podcast, what you like about the podcast. We'd love to see you there in Salt Lake. The other thing, we've got friends at a lot of these reamer manufacturers. Now, we're going to go with Manson for this one. If you would like to see a representative from Manson on the podcast, I think we might be able to pull some strings and talk all things reamers. So if you'd like to see that, drop a comment here on YouTube or send us an email at podcast@hornady.com. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.